This is test video 6. This covered for myrevision.net. This covers tests 11 and 12, which are about creating and deleting users. So test 11 covers creating a user, and this is going to be where I check most of the validation for the project. This is because this is where I start dealing with personal data, and this is therefore where the validation must be working. And as the framework is the same throughout the project, this is where I've decided to test them. So if I test each field in turn, I will start by just putting normal data in each field. There we go. So first let's check the email there. See, that is an invalid email address, and let me get that response. Invalid email. Next I'm going to put in what looks like a valid email address but isn't valid. This is because there is already a user with this email address. I'm logged in as it now. If I try to create this user, I will get that as an error message there. Put the valid data in. We can check the email is valid by moving to checking the next field, which is the first name. So I put invalid data there, valid data there. We should see now that we get an invalid first name, and we do. So I put the valid data in there, and now I put some invalid data in the last name. This is just a string that's too long, same as the first name, and we get that error. So it's successful. Now the next two fields, the user type and the date of birth, need to be checked from the inspector here. This is where the values can be changed. So I put an invalid access level in, or user type, something like this, just a long random string. We'll see that this will fail. It's invalid. If I were to get something like the word admin, I'll try this one, and it won't work. This is because admin needs to be secure. It needs to be only me, because that has access to data from across the board, from all kinds of different schools, and is therefore should not be accessible by the normal user. Finally, field to check is the date of birth. This one once again requires a little bit of manipulation on the back end, the front end here even. I just stick a string in there and it'll fail. But if I were to stick a normal date in there, like that one, that is just as navigable from here. If I come out here, I can get the same date, there, and there. The value hasn't changed at all. And if we're going to add this user, I will quickly bring up a test. If I go to a query editor, I can show that this query, I'll show you the users table, and this query will be done as a manual check to show that currently there are a couple of users in there, but there are no live users with this set of credentials with this data. Here we are. So I select from users. This is my admin school. This is where I've been using for testing. If I run that query, we shall see there's 4 users in here, but these two at student.ron@gmail are both inactive users. Now if I go to create this user, if it wasn't in my browser, I can create, and we shall have a success. And if I go back to my database here, run the query, there is a new created user. Therefore, test 11 is successful. So now I'm going to sign in that new user, and I'll explain test 12. Test 12 is about testing the deleting users, and this is where I test some more validation, because whilst we've tested the fields themselves, we haven't tested whether users can or cannot issue I've got here is that this user has been deleted, but the browser doesn't know that yet. So if I run the sign out method there, turn off that breakpoint, we should now be back successfully. There we go. And I can now sign in using the password it gave me. So 12 is testing about deleting, and I'm going to test the validation for users that are not supposed to be able to go to certain places. So if I take a student user, like I've just created here, and I want to take them to edit users, and try and delete a user, see that doesn't work. So that was why I had that breakpoint, because if I now go to edit users here, I can go in console. This requires intimate knowledge of the code, but I can change my access level and let me in. That is very unlikely to happen in a full release by a normal user, but it is plausible. So I now have to test that and make sure that if a student were to try and delete a user, it doesn't work. Try to delete a teacher as well, it also doesn't work. So they are validated on the back end to make sure that they cannot perform an action they shouldn't be allowed to, like deleting a user. But if I were to take this teacher account, which should be able to delete users, and try and delete the student here, the student is successfully deleted. And test 12 is completed successfully.